Thank you, Tariq, and thank you for inviting me here to speak today. It's always, when you're known to be a sort of agitator in the community, you don't always get invited to speak on panels, so I'm always very surprised and very grateful when I am invited, so thank you for that. First of all, the report, I'll just say a little bit about the report. I have only really skim-read it, and what I've gathered from that, it needs much more reading several times, really, because it's a very dense report, and it's covering a very complex, action-filled sort of 10 to 15 years, really. So it needs, it's managed to get a lot of information there. But the problem with any written information or report is not so much what's in it, but what's left out of it. And I think what I'm going to sort of focus on a little bit is what's sort of left out in it, because in a sense that's what struck me first. And has somebody, as Tariq has said, have been around more than 25 years, the sort of history that's been written in the report, I've sort of lived through most of it. So actually reading the report was very emotional and very painful, because I can remember a lot of the things that happened, and so therefore from my own reading I was able to put the content into that. But what I'd like to say is that our view with An-Nisa Society has been that as a faith-based community, the Muslim community has really led the way on tackling the issue of faith minorities. And I think that in a sense, it sometimes feels like we've sort of had to sort of bear the scalp of this engagement, because the reason why the Muslim community became an issue, because the system and structures that we were operating in didn't have a way to deal with a community that was being excluded because of the race legislation, but there was no mechanisms for engagement as a faith-based community. And this was blatantly became obvious after 9/11, that the lack of engagement and the lack of and the alienation of the Muslim community was totally exposed. And really what happened with the sort of plethora of engagement that happened after 9/11 was that it sort of took away the real work that needed to be done, the real work on the ground of the alienation of Muslim communities from the systems that already exist, the systems that are there for everybody, the sort of democratic processes at local government level or any level that you go around to influence, whether it be local policy or national policy, there is a system in place. And what 9/11 did and what 7/7 did and all the sort of prevent policies did is, in a sense, it jettisons the Muslim community completely out of that. And while it claimed to be engaging Muslim communities to make us more engaged, but actually it didn't. It created a sort of alien universe that we had to engage with at some level. We became accountable and responsible for the complexities of the disengagement and the international things that were happening with radicalization. We became guilty and responsible for that. Whereas government, even till today, has not taken its responsibility for its failure to its citizens. I wouldn't even say put Muslims in there. We as citizens have been failed. And the process of engagement still today are weak and vulnerable. And we will see, in a sense, we have a little bit of a quiet period at the moment, but we will see in years to come is that the alienation will continue because nothing has been put in place in the proper democratic way that we have in this country to engage Muslims at that level. Yes, I can agree this has been achieved and that's been achieved and that's been achieved. All of it has been fragmented. It's not been systematic, and and unless you take the bull by the horns in social policy and public policy, you really just end up spending a lot of money in things which are dead enders and don't go anywhere. So what I really want to say is that one of the things that the Muslim community have achieved, I think what we've done with our blood, basically, excuse me for being emotional about it, is that we questioned the limitations of the Race Relations Act. We said that this is not sufficient. We didn't say it was not necessary. We said it wasn't sufficient to deal with the changing nature of British society. And we were left out at that time of the millions, if not billions of pounds that were spent in shaping this idea of minority communities being either African, Asian or Caribbean. So therefore there was money When people talk about the £60 million that was spent in the Muslim communities post 9/11, 7/7, that's peanuts in comparison to what was done historically to mainstream the anti-racist agenda, basically. So therefore, we have a right to be targeted for special attention, but we need to be targeted so that we're properly engaged, so that the money is not wasted. We challenge the politics of the aversion to faith in public life and political life. We challenge that. You know, other faith communities are benefiting from the sacrifices that Muslim communities have made by being targeted and victimized by public policy. We've challenged the idea that one cap fits all. It doesn't. The Muslim community is diverse, it's complex, it's changing. And I would even argue the Muslim community is most probably one of the few minority communities that has such a range of diversity within it. You can either look at that as a negative thing, but personally I really see our diversity as a very positive thing. We have new emerging Muslim communities, British Muslims, my children's generation, who see themselves totally rooted in this country. They are marrying other people from within the Muslim cultural traditions, you know, so therefore we have a whole range of complexities happening there. And we've challenged the Western governments on the way it looks at the Muslim community and how it deals with it. They don't know. Till today, they can write reports up to the sky, but they still don't understand us because they don't ask the most fundamental questions. And the reality of the engagement has been that the government has actually been playing a cat and mouse game with the Muslim community. So it knows us. I was involved in 3 campaigns, the Forced Marriage Working Party, the Ted Cantle Community Cohesion Review, and the PET, Preventing Violence and Extreme. I personally was involved in that. And I know for a fact that the government knows who the players are in the Muslim community. It invited to Windsor a whole range of people, but on none of these occasions did the government take advantage to take further that engagement at the level of proper public policy and proper engagement through the democratic process. It failed to do that. And the prevent policy will always be the Achilles heel of any government if it continues to make that as the building block in which it wishes to view the community without taking on board the issue of institutional Islamophobia and how government policy itself has discriminated against Muslims. I could go on, but I will leave it at that. But what I think this report highlights is the 4 areas, which is very interesting about government, equalities, faith sector, and prevent. See, the government, you know, I would argue, it sort of follows election models. It wants votes. As soon as it realizes it's pushed the Muslim community too far, right, it pulls back and tries to win. I went to a meeting where Ed Miliband was really trying to sweeten up the Muslim community. Okay, I've got 2 minutes and I've got loads to say, so I'm going to be quickly. So government followed foreign policy-led initiatives. Equalities followed a sort of left-wing race model. The faith centre following a Christian model. And prevent is a security-led. That has been, as the report sort of paraphrases, really what's been the problem. And the thing which I'll sort of have to say very quickly is the most important thing that this report has left out, which I feel very upset about really, is that it's left the role of women have played in shaping public agenda before 9/11. And I know for a fact Unisa Society had played a key role on the issue of religious discrimination. That's not mentioned. We wrote the most significant report. It wasn't mentioned in this report. The Preventing Violence, the only really significant response to the prevent policy was written by our director Khalida Khan, and which is not mentioned in this report. In fact, I'm very sort of disturbed about is that I feel that I wasn't really quoted properly in the sort of page 59 about the role that we were in, our participation in the Prevent program. It doesn't mention there about, you know, what was really missing there is that our engagement when we did the Pathfinder was only on the basis that Brent Council engages in making whatever we are doing mainstream, and it opens them up to mainstreaming Muslim communities, which it never did, right? So that's why we left it, and then we investigated it, and our investigation led to this report. And our report has played a significant role in derailing a lot of the prevent policy, and it's not really been mentioned. And we have done so many significant things. Our contribution towards the equalities policy, we wrote a report from that, which has influenced Muslims in the way they think, right the way from the beginning, from our views about the race relations way back in the 80s. None of this has really been adequately mentioned because when you're a independent, self-funding, or not self-funding, sort of independent organization, it's very difficult to be put somewhere. And I will say, I'll conclude with being a bit controversial and saying that there is a sort of male mafia out there. The government plays along with the male mafia, and Muslim organizations play along with male mafias, that they all have nice backslapping with each other, and then the women in particular who are doing the hard graft of the work on the ground with real people, when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to be making the significance of their work that they're doing, we're not there, and it's the men who are the front of the work. I could say more, but I'll end there.